Hello and welcome. I'm Sam Califer, your host for Vision, the show where we talk all about the College of Arts and Sciences as well as its faculty and students. Today I'm joined by Dr. Kimberly Kelly, an associate professor in the Department of Sociology and the director of the Gender Studies program. Thanks so much for being here.
Hi Sam, thanks so much for having me.
Yes, I'm so excited to have you on and talk about all of the great work you do. But first, I was hoping you could just introduce yourself, talk about your professional background, and how you came to Mississippi State.
Absolutely. So I am a transplant from Atlanta, and I will say I never get tired of how much better the traffic here is in Starkville. But I'm from the Atlanta area, and I got my PhD at the University of Georgia, and when I finished that, I was offered a tenure-track job here at Mississippi State, and I grabbed it and have never looked back. So I've been here 13 years, and I've been the director of gender studies for 10. And professionally speaking, my research, I work a lot with ethnography and interviews, and across a range of topics.
What even exactly is gender studies, and why is that field so important?
Gender studies is an interdisciplinary, critical approach to the social construction of gender. Like, gender is not real. There's no objective reality. If there's no set of characteristics that all women have, or all men have, or all non-binary people have. And it doesn't have an objective reality, but it obviously has terribly real consequences for how people live their lives, for their aspirations, for different types of inequality or privilege that they'll experience. And gender studies analyzes those within different disciplines, within sociology, within history, within English. And there's an explicit attention to hierarchies, right? When are people of certain gender groups more valued or more privileged versus more marginalized relative to others? So we pay a lot of attention to intersections, like the intersection of gender with race or gender with sexual orientation. And these things have really profound consequences for how people experience life, the life chances they have. And so depending on what discipline you're looking at, we'll turn that lens on different aspects of gender. And really our understanding of gender is growing ever more complex. We understand there's masculinities, we understand there's femininities, but now we're also engaging more in studies of queer gender identity, non-binary gender identity. And this has opened up a lot of exciting areas of research and teaching within the field of gender studies. And of course, the great thing about gender studies is it offers both individual and societal benefits. So for the individual, they're going to learn critical thinking, strong communication skills. They'll have an appreciation, understanding not only of diversity, but what happens when diverse identities are not respected and valued. And at the community level, of course, we know there are problems, there are inequalities tied to gender. And if we don't understand how they operate and who they affect and how, we can't do anything about them. So gender studies is also a really important part of solving social problems.
The Gender Studies program has grown so much under your leadership. I was wondering if you could talk about, over the past decade, what are some of the accomplishments that have meant the most to you?
Oh, sure. There's a number of them. I would say the first is we've established a clear and ongoing focus on LGBTQ plus perspectives and issues, and that was something that was not present really anywhere on campus at that time. That's something I'm very proud of. It's incredibly important, and it deserves center stage. We've also really increased the number of external speakers that we are able to make available to our students. Obviously, we have great faculty here, and we rely on them to do a lot, but we're also able to pull in experts from other campuses that offer a wider range of perspectives and research topics. We have also been able to establish a number of our own unique events, sort of establishing a gender studies brand, if you will. And that includes a number of annual events like our National Coming Out Day speaker, our Feminist Film Fest in November of every year, and our Feminist Pedagogy panel, which meets every spring semester. And then I would say our most recent accomplishment, we are this close to getting a social justice studies minor approved. It's at the last level needed for approval. And I'm particularly excited about this, not because it's such a timely field of study and student response so far has been tremendous, but we are pulling courses from most of the departments in the college, and the response from faculty, from department heads, from the dean's office has just been tremendous. This is something people want, this is something they're excited about, and we're really excited about getting that launched this fall.
That is fascinating, and it really does seem like it's grown so much under you, and it's doing such important work, so that is great to hear. Next month is March, Women's History Month, And, I was hoping you could just talk about what's the significance of that and maybe what could we be trying to learn during the time.
Sure. So Women's History Month, originally in 1911, it was International Women's Day, because apparently one day out of 365 was enough to think about women. But we've come a long way. By the 1980s, early 1980s, it was Women's History Week. And then by the late 80s, it was Women's History Month, which is currently celebrated in the United States, the United Kingdom, Australia. Canada has one, but theirs is in October. But it operates as kind of a corrective to a record that's ignored the contributions of women, that has not always fully appreciated their contributions, their achievements, and hasn't necessarily always told the full story of the role women have played in U.S. history or in the ongoing achievements of this nation. I can give you a couple examples. So, for example, in the Civil Rights Movement, right, tremendously important, especially here in Mississippi, that story, it's a very powerful, it's a moving story, it's America at its best, but it's often told as a story of singular, unique, charismatic, one-of-a-kind men who led this movement, who led these nonviolent strategies, and were able to make gains for racial equity, such as the Civil Rights Act of 1964. But that hides an entire secondary layer of leadership and activism in the civil rights movement. Black women formed their own leadership networks. They were what historians have referred to as bridge leaders. So they were the ones canvassing, knocking on doors, asking different communities not only to register to vote, but what else they needed to be safe economically and physically before they could do this important work of registering to vote and changing the political system. And these women understood what the priorities of these communities were. They were able to connect them with the larger social movement organizations, with those extraordinary leaders that were the spokespeople for the movement. And without these bridge leaders, it wouldn't have happened. You can't just have a handful of extraordinary leaders and no meaningful connections between those leaders and the rest of the movement. Someone has to do the organizing. Someone has to do the everyday work. Someone has to get that done. And without understanding the story of women's bridge leadership, we don't really know the story of the civil rights movement. Another example where gender studies can help us, where I think Women's History Month often tends to be an opportunity to focus on the gender wage gap. Women make much less money than men. For white women, it's about 75 cents on the dollar. For Black women and Hispanic women, it's closer to about 50 cents on the white male dollar. And that's a problem, and we need to fix it. Mm-hmm. And some people tend to say, well, women just make different choices. They drop out of the workforce to have kids, or they pick careers that don't pay as well. Well, why is it that it's mostly women that feel they have to drop out of the labor force to raise kids? Why isn't that something that men aren't doing? This is the stall revolution. Women's work roles have transformed, but men's domestic roles have not so much. And of course, it also ignores the fact that labor that's associated almost exclusively or predominantly with women, it's not that it's less valuable from a monetary sense, it's that it's devalued because women do it. So for example, can we really argue that a kindergarten teacher, somebody who teaches kids how to read, the most fundamental of all skills, can't be successful in anything without it, are they really less important than a business executive? I'd argue no. Mm-hmm. But of course, their salaries don't reflect how important they are, because we assume women will do this nurturing work and they don't need to be compensated for it. And so Women's History Month, those are just two examples, but it invites us to dig deeper to actually understand what's going on, what do women contribute, what have they achieved, and how is the story incomplete when we don't understand women's role in our history and our contemporary life.
Right, yes, it's highlighting, all of the accomplishments that women have made, mm-hmm. but I think on a deeper level, it is sort of challenges you to rethink the way you view history and society. Mm-hmm. And to understand that everyone plays an important part. It's all connected, and that obviously includes women.
Absolutely. You want the complete story, you got to have the women.
That's right. And so that's great to hear. I know that you are an advocate for, women's studies, gender studies, mm-hmm. Women's History Month, and the program does such a good job of plugging into the campus. You're always having these different events or seminars. So could you tell me what kind of events you have planned this year for Women's History Month?
Sure. We're actually spreading the fun out over March and April. So up first, on March 29th, we are having Stetson School of Law professor Robin Powell, who is also a disability rights attorney. She will be speaking on Free Britney, Achieving Reproductive Justice for All Disabled People. And of course, quite famously, Britney Spears was under a conservatorship Her family argued that she was struggling with mental illness that effectively disabled her, and therefore somebody else, in this case her father, had to make all decisions for her, including not allowing her to remove her IUD when she wanted to have more children. She has 2 little boys. And she wasn't allowed to have more kids. She wasn't allowed to make that decision for herself. And too often, people with disabilities are blocked from their own reproductive freedom, from the right to have a child, to the right to the resources needed to raise that child. It's so critical to that reproductive freedom perspective. So Professor Powell will be speaking on that on March 29th. On, March 8th, went a little bit out of order there, we have our annual Feminist Pedagogy panel. And this one is titled Pandemic Pedagogy, What Your Students Want You to Know About Learning During COVID-19. And I love the Feminist Pedagogy panel. It's one of our signature events. But this year, instead of having the best pedagogical experts among our faculty demonstrate techniques and teach the rest of us about something important about feminist teaching, we've designated students as the expert. And we've recruited a really diverse panel of 6 students from 3 different colleges, very different backgrounds. And we're going to rely on their expertise to tell us what has it been like to be an undergraduate student during all of this. And of course, all these students were enrolled prior to March 2020. So they have experience in the before times, if you will, and in pandemic learning. So really excited about what they had to tell us about the challenges they faced, the supports they've received from instructors in the university that have worked, things that they wish they could change a bit. So very excited about that. But we've got our student experts, we're ready to go. And then our final event for the semester, it will be on April 12th, and Dr. Caleb Briscoe, who's here at Mississippi State, and Dr. Veronica Jones-Baldwin at the University of North Texas will be talking to us about, their talk is titled The Commodification of Men of Color Initiatives, Enabling Institutional Change. And what they're looking at is there are programs on a lot of college and university campuses that are aimed at the retention and graduation rates of men of color. And some of those work, and some of them just can kind of become window dressing. And so Drs. Briscoe and Baldwin-Jones are going to be walking us through that.
So interesting to hear. All of the events are so different in their focus, and I feel like anyone could go to them and just learn so much. So fascinating to hear. And just to end, I wanted to thank you so much for joining me today and talking about all the work that you do. And thank you all for tuning in to this episode of Vision. We'll see you next time.